down around 2 floors.
Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. For breakfast this morning, I had an omelet at my hotel. It was quite delicious. With jalapenos, so it is spicy. But overall, it was a good breakfast.
I just go check it on my phone to see what the...
Can I bring this stand down here to you guys? Let me do that. And that way I can swap around this stage here. Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. For lunch, I had a Culver's chicken sandwich, which was a good sandwich. I'm trying to avoid too much beef, so I chose the chicken, although it was fried, so I guess it wasn't very good instead of the grilled chicken. But people can learn my dietary habits when I travel as we test the mic here. Is this coming through okay? Does it sound all right?
I'm getting
Okay.
Yep. Better than it was this morning. We're definitely,
Okay.
so I will introduce you.
Okay. I'm going to turn this off now.
Yeah. And then, we'll use this mic if you have questions after the presentation.
After, I was going to do some Q&A, yeah. So I'm going to go try to get one more box of books. We may have one until we kind of throw there, so I'll have to run out.
Yeah, sure.
And is there a restaurant?
Yeah. So down 2 flights of stairs. Go around. There you'll see signs.
Okay. rest of you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Grace Church. I was reminded this morning while I was doing a little research that this land on which we are was Ho-Chunk land, and the lots were purchased for $1.50 in 1847 from a out-of-state real estate developer, and of course it had originally been taken from the Ho-Chunk. And we recently had a land bearing value for $20 million. It's probably the most. So that's a reminder of where we are and who we are, and acknowledge the continued presence of the Ho-Chunk among us. We're delighted this afternoon to have Mark Charles, co-author of a really amazing book, Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery, to talk to us about the Doctrine of Discovery, American history, and the effects of the Doctrine of Discovery on Native peoples. Mark's presentation will be followed by an opportunity for questions and a Q&A session. And there are books, if you haven't read the book, there are books for sale in the back. Mark?
Thank you.
Well, Mark Charles and Michelle, syndicate national, Dr. Henry Bashi, syndicate national, in our novel culture, when we introduce ourselves, we always give our four claims. We're matrilineal to people, and our identity of our mother's mother. My mother's mother is American of Dutch heritage, and that's why I say syndicate national. Loosely translated, that means I'm from the Mushu people. My second clan, my father's mother, is Dehumanizing, which is the waters that flow together. My third clan, my mother's father, is also syndicated now. And my fourth clan, my father's father, is Tochigi, and that's the Bitter Water clan. It's one of the original clans born out of the people. I want to acknowledge that in this general Madison, Wisconsin area, we are on the lands of the Peoria, the Sauk, the Fox, the Maimea, the Ojete Sacrament, the Ho-Chunk, and the Kickapoo. So these are the nations that they were living here, they were hunting here, they were farming here, they were fishing here, they were raising their families here, and burying their dead here, long before Columbus got lost at sea. And they are still here. I want to acknowledge these people and these nations as the host peoples of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humble I am to be walking on these lands today. I'm going to be talking for about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes probably. During this time, I can almost guarantee you it does not matter what your political allegiance is, it doesn't matter if you're left or right, it doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal, it doesn't matter if you're right evangelical or very liberal form of Christianity, even if you have different faith tradition altogether. I can pretty much promise you in the next hour and a half you will be offended. You may be so offended you may want to stand up and throw something at me. You may be offended that you might start looking for a polite way or unpolite ways to walk out. I want to encourage you to resist those urges. Stay in your seats. There's a lot of things we don't know how to talk about as a country, but we need to discuss these things. They're vitally important, not only to understanding our past, but to moving us forward into the future. As was mentioned earlier, I am the co-author of this book, Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery. Much of what I present in this lecture can be found in this book. There's a lot of things that we present that extend beyond the book. And there's more things that I don't have time to go into that are far more in depth within this book. I have copies for sale in the back for $20 each. You can buy a signed copy from me here. You can take a credit card or whatever payment for them. I also have what's called a book study special, where if you want to buy 10 copies of the book for $200 for the purpose of starting a book study, I'll have my assistant get in touch with you, and we can arrange a virtual Q&A at some point during your study. so that you can have a Q&A with me and your study. I've done several of these, and I love these conversations. I live for these conversations because while the Q&A will have after this event will be good, I can pretty much script all the questions you're going to ask me, and I know where they're coming from because I've done this so often. The conversations I don't get to have are conversations with people who have been fucking geeking on these things for a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months. And those are the conversations I love. And so doing this book study special lets me engage with people who are reading through the book, are wrestling with it in a communal setting, and they have some very good discussions about what's coming out of the book. And so that's another thing. You get that here tonight, or you can watch it on my website, which is wirelessprogram.com. But before we get into this, I want to give you a very brief summary of what the doctrine of discovery is, and we'll talk about it more in depth later. The doctrine of discovery is a series of papal bulls, edicts of the Catholic Church. It says things like invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever. It's essentially the church of Europe saying to the nations of Europe, wherever you go, whatever lands you find, not ruled by white European Christian rulers, those people are subhuman and their land is yours to take. So one of the first questions we have to deal with as a nation, as well as a church, is how do we get this doctrine? Right? When Jesus said things like, love vengeance and pray for those who persecute you, how do you get from that to the doctrine that said you can kill people who don't look like, sound like, act like, speak like, or worship like you? And the first part of this book really deals with that. How do we go from the teachings of Jesus to the doctrine of discovery? And to understand this, you really have to understand the nation of Israel, the Jewish people. Right? They have a land covenant with the God of Abraham. This land covenant was fairly basic. If they obeyed God, God would bless them, and they would prosper in their lands. If they disobeyed God, God would curse them, even remove them from their lands, and they would no longer prosper. One of the barometers of their relationship with God was their prosperity. If their borders were secure, if the nation was strong, if their families and their people were well fed, if their children were healthy, they could rest assured that they were probably doing well in their relationship with God. If their borders were porous, if they were removed from their lands, if they had insecurities in food and safety, if they were at war, they could understand that there was something amiss, something wrong in their relationship with God. So the prosperity wasn't their only barometer, but it was one of their barometers. Now, when Jesus came into this world, he was coming as the Messiah. And people were expecting, they hadn't heard from God in 200 years. And they were waiting for God to send a Messiah to come and reestablish their earthly kingdom and bring them back to the greatness of the kingdom of David. This is why we have so many sects going on back in the first century. We have the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, all of these groups are trying to figure out what could they do to compel God to send the David Messiah quicker. Right? So the Pharisees said, hey, maybe if we Israeli people didn't just keep the law, we kept the law of the priests, which was even more holy, that would get God to notice us and send his Messiah quicker. So the people were waiting. They were waiting for the Messiah to come and reestablish their earthly kingdom. Now, Jesus was coming as the Messiah, but he also knew he had some different agenda items than they were looking for. And so he began to work to change their expectations. So yes, he was the Son of God, he was the Messiah, but he was born in a barn and raised up as a refugee. Yes, he was the Messiah, the Son of Man, and angels announced his birth, but they were singing to shepherds. Right? He was changing their expectations a little bit. To understand the land covenant, I actually want to give you a quote from Deuteronomy. This is how people organize, they understood the land covenant. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, it says, if we keep his commandments and his ordinances and his laws, and the articles of our wisdom, we may live and be multiplied, and the word of God will bless us in the land whether we go out warn you. I have a lot of quotes I'm going to be reading to you. I know that this is a projector, and I showed them to you, and you can read them in black and white, and you'll know at least have some sense of security that I'm not lying to you. But we don't have a projector here today, so I'm going to read these quotes to you, and there's not just these quotes from the scriptures, but other quotes I'm going to give you, and you're going to think I'm lying to you. So, Father Joel was in the backyard and I spoke at his church yesterday, and they live streamed the whole thing, and they have all the slides on there. Most of these quotes are also in the book, so if you don't trust me, check me out. You'll think I'm lying, but I'm not lying whatsoever. So, Jesus comes into the world, and he's changing their expectations. And early in his ministry, Satan comes to tempt him. And he tempts him with what he thought the goal was, which was an earthly kingdom. And so he takes Jesus to the high mountain, and he shows him the kingdoms of the world. And he says, Jesus, if you bow down to me, these kingdoms have been given to me, I will give them to you. Jesus said, no, that's not the goal. I'm not tempted by that. And he walked away. In Luke chapter 7, John the Baptist, who was the one announcing the coming of Jesus, he was in prison, and he heard that Jesus was out healing the children of widows and healing the servants of centurions. And this did not sound like an imperial Messiah who was helping the enemy and helping the poor. And so he sent his disciples to Jesus and said, hey, are you the one we're looking for, or are we supposed to wait for somebody else? Jesus turned around, healed more sick people, cast out more demons, gave sight to more of the blind, and hearing to more of the deaf, and said to John's disciples, go back and tell your master what you just saw, and blessed is the man who doesn't stumble on my account. He rebukes John the Baptist and says, this is who I am, and this is what I'm doing, either get on or get out of the way. At one point, Jesus was out teaching, and there was a group of people, several thousand, who were there listening to him, and the disciples wanted to get some rest, and so they told Jesus to send the people away. He said, you're right, these people are hungry. You guys do them. And they're like, we don't have any food. And so they would go out to find this kid, shake him down, and grab his lunch, and they come back, and they're like, here we got 5 loaves and 3 fish. Like, this isn't even enough for Peter to eat. You know, like, we're never going to feed everybody. And Jesus takes the food, looks up to heaven, and says, thank you, passes it out, and feeds everybody. They're so amazed that the people come to make Jesus their king by force. And he's like, this is not what I'm here to do. And he walks away. In Mark chapter 8, Jesus with his disciples had shown them who he is and what he's doing and what he's about. And he says to his disciples, who do the people think I am? And they say, well, some think you're John the Baptist. Others think you're one of the Old Testament prophets. Still others think you're even Elijah. Come back to that. And Jesus says, well, how about you? Who do you think I am? Peter, who's always the spokesman, says, I think you're the Messiah. Now, Jesus doesn't say, give me, God. Let's go tell everybody. He says, shh, don't tell anyone. And then he starts telling his disciples that the Messiah, the Son of Man, must suffer, be persecuted, and die on the cross. Now, this was not the meetings they had with the Messiah that they were waiting so long for, and so Peter, very boldly, took his own teacher aside and began to rebuke him. Jesus turned towards Peter, looked him in the eye, and said, get behind me, Satan. You are not on the side of God, but of men. And he went on to teach them that not only was the Son of Man going to suffer and be persecuted, but his disciples, they will also be persecuted. In Luke chapter 21, he told them they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogue and put you in prison. You will be brought before kings and governors. All that out of my name. He does not paint this good picture for that. The disciples, of course, just like us, are not excited about being persecuted. And the whole half of the second half of the Gospels are about the disciples bumping heads with Jesus. We don't like this plan you have for us. And he even starts to change the paradigm, right? understanding of prosperity. They will never be a deep love relationship with God, not when they're blessed and they're strong, but when they're weak and they're persecuted. Again, the disciples don't like this idea. They're not excited about that at all. And as Jesus' ministry comes to an end, especially as he's arrested, his disciples all flee. They leave him alone with the soldiers to be brought before Pilate. And he goes before Pilate, and Pilate doesn't want to crucify him. He's looking for a way to set him free. So he's asking Jesus these questions. Now, Jesus isn't helping his cause because he's not answering. Finally, in exasperation, Pilate says, "Don't you know who I am? I have the power to kill you or to set you free. Answer my questions." And Jesus scoffs at him. "You don't have any authority over me. All you have is my Father in heaven gave me. So my kingdom's not of this earth. If my kingdom were here, my servants, the angels, not my friends or my disciples, would be fighting to set me free." He said, "My kingdom is not of here. My kingdom is somewhere else." Jesus was absolutely adamant. His kingdom was not an earthly kingdom. And he died alone. It wasn't until Pentecost that the disciples finally flew in after they received the Holy Spirit that Jesus was right, that they embraced this new paradigm so much that almost all of the disciples went on to die a martyr's death. So in the first century, when you join this radical group of people called the church, through your discipleship, through your fellowship, through your baptism, you know that your participation, your membership in this church was almost certainly going to lead to your persecution and possibly even to your death. And this went on for about 300 years. The first 300 years of the church was filled with persecution. Now, in the early first century, we have the bishop of Caesarea, Eusebius, who decided to write down an ecclesiastical history, the history of the church. Now, he started this book, ecclesiastical history, is actually a volume of 11 books. He starts with the killing of the babies before Jesus was born. He kind of skims over Jesus' ministry, picks it up with the stoning of Stephen. He establishes the divinity of Christ, and he holds up in high regard the martyrs. These are pious men and women who are sharing in the suffering of Christ. Around book 8, he introduces a new character. This character is Constantinius, who is an emperor of Rome, who is a blessed man, which is confounding because up to now, all of the emperors have been persecuting the church and have been the enemy of the church, and so now we have a blessed emperor. And then we get introduced to his son Constantine, and Constantine, Eusebius basically ordains as the divine emperor of Rome. Now, between books 8 and 9, Eusebius inserts a book. It's called the Book of the Martyrs. This book is about the great persecution of 404 AD. This is one of the bloodiest persecutions in the history of the church. In this persecution that took place in Caesarea and in Palestine, which is where Eusebius was from, he notes that he saw some of these people die with his own eyes, and he knew many of them personally. So the persecution touched him. Going into books 10, 11, and 12, now his attitude toward persecution begins to change. And instead of holding up the martyrs in high regard, he now looks at the empire and the emperors and what can we do to end the persecution. Now, if you're writing a book called Ecclesiastical History, right? Your book technically doesn't have a conclusion. Because the history of the church will conclude when the bride of the church returns. And the fact that you're reminding them when it's evidence that hasn't happened yet, so you are really like a pre-law, early chapter, in one treating you very, very good outside. But if you read to the last volume, the last book, and the last chapter of the last The title of this chapter is The Victory of Constantine and the Lessons under him Accrue to the Whole Roman World. And in this chapter he writes that at the same time they celebrated and extolled first of all God, the universal King, because thus they were taught. Then they also celebrated the praises of the pious emperor, and with him all his divinely favored children. The supreme God granted from heaven above the fruits of his piety, the trophies of the victory over the wicked and the nefarious tyrant, with all his counselors and their kids. He cast prostrate, not at the feet of Christ, but at the feet of Constantine. See, I call my life, I belong to heresy of Christendom. I'm Constantine. He's the one who converted Christianity. He's the one who made Rome Christian. He moved the capital. He fundamentally changes what it meant to be the church. Prior to Constantine, you were a member of the church because of your values and your profession, your community. After Constantine, you were a member of the church because of your citizenship and the empire. And I've always blamed the heresy of Christendom on Constantine. But Constantine was being fed, being discipled by Eusebius. And in his book, Ecclesiastical History, when the Great Persecution touched him, and he decided to no longer love this paradigm of suffering, and he wanted to end the persecution, he decided he would do that by propping up emperors and ordaining them as divine rulers over Rome. And Constantine did. So Eusebius was the one who was creating this heresy. And if you want to establish a heresy of a Roman earthly Christian empire, your biggest obstacle is Christ. Because Christ was out. His kingdom was not on this earth. And so to establish this heresy, what Eusebius had to do is he had to write Christ out of ecclesiastical history and insert Constantine. So his last paragraph, the supreme God granted from heaven above the fruits of his piety, the children of the wicked and the father's tyrant, with all his counselors and his, he cast prostrate at the feet of Constantine. His next book was just flat out heresy. The life of the Blessed Constantine. I won't even go into that. So, the 5th century had a dilemma, which is it had a very active heresy now, which was the heresy of Christian empire. It had a Christian empire with Rome. And so the theologians of the day had to decide, do we collude with this, or do we prophesy to it? One of the major theologians of the 5th century was St. Augustine. St. Augustine is known for several things. One of which was his just war theory. Now, I use the evidence that he wrote just war theory. I use that as evidence that he was choosing to collude with empire instead of prophesying. Because the just war theory was about two things. A, how do nations fight more justly? But B, it was about how do Christian citizens of these nations go off and kill in the name of God and country because a contextual reason's teaching doesn't allow it. So you have to do some theological gymnastics to justify it. So again, in fact, that can work, this just war theory's evidence. But I want to see where you cross the line, right? Because when you cross the line with Jesus, he tends to call you out. I read through his writings on 2 kingdoms. While he's pretty clear that the kingdom of man is not the kingdom of God, he seems to have an attitude that we have this, so let's try and make it work. Then he got to his book on the correction of the dogmatists. And in this book, he's actually dealing with a very prevalent question, which is what is the role of a Christian king in a Christian empire? We've never had this before, basically. We've always had a pagan empire, it's a pagan king. Now we have a Christian empire, and a Christian king. And what is the job of that king? He says, how are kings to serve the Lord with fear, except by preventing and chastising with religious severity gains what is righteous and punishes what is the reverse. In chapter 6, he goes on and says, it is indeed better that men should be led to worship God by teaching than they should be driven to it by fear of punishment or pain. But many have an advantage in first being compelled by fear or pain, so that afterwards they might be influenced by teaching. So he is arguing the role of the Christian king in the Christian empire is to compel people through fear, punishment, and pain to obey the commands of the Lord and the laws of the church. This is complete opposite to what Jesus taught. Right? Complete opposite of what he taught. If Jesus didn't have a hard time calling St. Peter Satan, I don't think he hesitated for a moment to look at St. Augustine and say, "Why are you sinking? Get behind me, Satan! No, it's not God, but obviously received no such rebuke. And so his teaching went on to basically justify the Crusades, which was about expanding Christendom as well as protecting Jerusalem. In the 17th century, we had another theologian wrestling with heretics. His name was Thomas Aquinas. And he was basically saying, if the world has the authority to kill people who break men's laws, how much more right does the church have to kill people who break God's laws? He says there's a much greater matter to corrupt the faith, which quickens the soul, than to forge money which supports temporal life. Wherefore, if forgers of money and other evildoers are forced to condemned to death by the secular authority, how much more reason is there for heretics, as soon as they enter into the heresy, to not only be excommunicated, but even put to death? So now he's arguing that the role of the Christian king in the Christian empire is to kill people who don't keep the commands of the scriptures or of the church. Also in the 17th century, we have the introduction of the word called the infidel. The infidel was a subhuman category of other who was used in application to the Moors who would become Muslims. It was also applied to indigenous peoples, anyone who didn't worship the God of the right way to be a Christian male. Now that we have this category of infidel, now we're going to need to just go through, because now we can fight our wars based on theological grounds. We're fighting the other. We're fighting the enemies of Christ. So it's out of this that in 1452, Pope Nicholas V writes out these words, and he says, invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever. Reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, convert them to his and to their use and profit. This papal bull, along with other papal bulls written between 1452 and 1493, are collectively known as what we call the Doctrine of Discovery. This is the doctrine that European nations go to Africa, colonize the continent, and enslave the people because they did not see them as human. It's the same doctrine that Columbus, who was literally lost at sea, landed in this new world and claimed to have discovered it. The first sentence of the first chapter of this book says you cannot discover lands already inhabited. You can conquer those lands, you can steal those lands, you can colonize them. You cannot discover them unless your doctrine, your worldview informs you that the people already living here are not fully human. This makes the doctrine of discovery a white, male supremacist, and Christian nationalist doctrine that is the direct fruit of a church that for almost 2,000 years has prostituted itself out to the empire. So that was 1452 through 1493, Columbus. In 1621, we had the first Thanksgiving. It took place in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We love to paint pictures of this and do skits about it and have our kids make little drawings about it and frame it as this cross-cultural potluck, this kumbaya between natives and pilgrims. But we don't ever talk about the context in which this first Thanksgiving took place. In 1616 to 1619, we had
the winter of 1616 to 1617, an expedition dispatched by Sir Fernando Cortes found the region devastated by war and disease. The remaining people were so sore afflicted with the plague, for that country was in a manner left void of inhabitants. 2 years later, another Englishman found ancient plantations now completely empty with few inhabitants, and those who had survived were suffering greatly. So we have this great dying, where literally this European-like plague spread through the indigenous population, wiping out entire villages along the northeast coast of our country, of Turtle Island. So in 1620, King James, who was the same King James who ordered the translation of the Bible, he wrote the Charter of New England. Now I'll read this for you. It's in the Old English, so it's a bit harder to understand. But you have to hear me say, James, by the grace of God, King of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, and to all whom these presents shall come, greetings, whereas upon the humble petition of divers and our well-disposed subjects that intended to make several plantations in the parts of America between the degrees of 34 and 45. Within these late years, there hath by God's visitation reigned a wonderful plague, together with many horrible slaughters and murders committed against the savages and British people here, over there, heretofore inhabiting in a manner to the utter destruction, devastation, and depopulation of that whole territory, so that there is not left for many leagues together in a manner any that do claim or challenge any kind of interest therein or any superior lord or sovereign to make claim hereunto. Whereby we have judged, are persuaded and satisfied that the appointed time is come in which Almighty God, in His great goodness and bounty towards us and our people, hath thought fit and determined that these large and goodly territories, deserved as they were by the natural inhabitants, should be possessed and enjoyed by such of our subjects and people. And heretofore and hereafter shall by His mercy and favor, and by His powerful arm be directed and conducted thither. So when they saw the devastation of the indigenous population, they saw these uninhabited villages with scores of bodies piled on top of each other and a few survivors clinging barely to life. Their faith didn't lead them to have mercy. Their faith didn't compel them to care for these people. Their faith didn't compel them to reach out to them. Their faith told them that this was God's blessing and that He was ethnically cleansing these lands for them. And because the population was now gone, they were there to take possession of them. One of the reasons the first Thanksgiving took place at Plymouth Rock is because that was probably a place that was devastated by the Great Dying. And so it was left empty. Thanksgiving probably began as a celebration of the ethnic cleansing of indigenous peoples. In 1630, John Luther, who was a Protestant pastor, was on board a ship using what's now called the Boston Harbor, and he was here to plant the Boston Column. On that ship, he preached a sermon titled A Model of Christian Charity. In this sermon, he referred to the people he was with as a city upon a hill. He was borrowed from the language of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, where he told his disciples to be a lamp on a stand, a city on a hill, shining their good deeds into this dark world. He went on to exhort them in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberality. They should rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together. They should keep the unity of the Spirit within the bonds of peace. These are just your basic Protestant Christian exhortations. The end of the sermon, he was trying to compel his congregants to heed his exhortations, and so he did what most pastors do, is he read from the Old Testament. And the passage he read was from Deuteronomy chapter 30. Now, who here has read Deuteronomy and Joshua? How is God commanding these people to take possession of their promised lands? In Deuteronomy chapter 20, it says, however, the cities of the nations the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave around anything that breathes. Completely destroy it, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Promised lands for one people is literally God ordaining genocide for another. I put this sermon as the birth of American exceptionalism. This myth. Because American exceptionalism doesn't just mean Americans do things better than other nations. It means we have a special place in God's heart. We have a unique relationship with God as well. And I think this is where that idea gets born here among Europeans on Turtle Island. And again, this isn't just 1630, right? 2015, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, was here in the United States. He was lobbying against the nuclear agreement that the Obama administration was negotiating with Iran. And he spoke to a joint session of Congress. And in his speech, he was speaking to a very divided, very close to Congress, just like today, we're even talking to each other. And he had everyone on the same page behind him. And the way he chose to do that was through one of the most unifying themes in American politics, which is the myth of American exceptionalism. And he said to our Congress, because America and Israel, we share a common destiny, the destiny of promised lands. If you're wondering why the United States of America has almost unanimous bipartisan support for Israel, it has nothing to do with freedom or equality. We have a very dysfunctional, codependent relationship with the modern nation state of Israel based on its misappropriation of land covenant. We need Old Testament Israel's legacy of promised lands to justify what we did to Native Americans and African Americans, and the modern nation state of Israel needs our flourishing as a nation with manifest destiny to justify what their group competitors and Palestinians. We have a very dysfunctional, codependent relationship with the modern nation state of Israel. It has nothing to do with freedom or equality. It's about justifying oppression, and in our case, genocide. So in 1763 now, King George, to the 13 colonies that are established in the United States, draws a line down the Appalachian Mountains. And he says to the colonists that they no longer have the right of discovery of the empty Indian lands west of Appalachia. This upsets the colonies, they want access to those lands. So a few years later, they write a letter of protest. In their letter, they accuse the king of raising the conditions of new appropriation of the land. And they go on to state that he has incited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring up the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages. They signed the letter on July 4th, 1776. Literally 30 lines below the statement, all men are created equal, the Declaration of Independence refers to Native Americans as merciless Indian savages. The only reason the founding fathers used their inclusive term all men is because their definition of who was human was incredibly narrow. This makes our Declaration of Independence a systemically racist and white supremacist document. Now, a few years later, we had another document that was written. This one began with the words, "We the people of the United States." This, of course, is the preamble to the Constitution. Anyone read the Constitution in the last 30 years? Few? So if you read the Constitution, just a few lines there, not much there, Article 1, Section 2. Article 1, Section 2 is the part of the Constitution that determines who is and who is not a part of this union, who is and who is not covered by this document. If you read Article 1, Section 2, the first thing you will note is it never mentions women. Now this is important because if you read the entire document, preamble to the 27th Amendment, you will find there are 51 gender-specific male pronouns. 51 he, him, and his, who can run for office, who can hold office, even who's protected by the document. Not a single female pronoun in the entire Constitution. So we have to know Article 1, Section 2 never mentions women. Second, it specifically excludes natives. And third, it comes out to dispute the civil person. So who's left? 1787, right? It leaves white men. And technically it was white men and women who could vote. You see, we don't think about this often. The purpose of our Constitution, the reason it was written, was to protect the interests of white landowning men. Now we say, well, we've corrected that, Mr. Charles. We have a whole slew of movements corrected that. Well, we tried. By 1865, we passed the 13th Amendment. Now, most Americans think the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery. They think the amendment states that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. That's not what it says. What it says is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime, whereas the party has been duly convicted shall exist. The 13th Amendment doesn't abolish slavery, it redefines and codifies it under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. This is the same criminal justice system that today incarcerates people at the highest rate of any country in the world. And we incarcerate our people of color at 3 to 5 times the rate we incarcerate white people. People also think the 14th Amendment fixes the Constitution. This was actually given to counter Section 2. And Section 1 of the 14th Amendment does. It's very interesting. It basically states anyone born on this continent under the jurisdiction of the government is entitled to citizenship. Very interesting. Section 2, however, very specifically says excluding aliens, and that talks about only the male inhabitants and male citizens. And it also keeps the law of civil rights under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. Uses the same tricks as the 13th Amendment did. Doesn't fix the problem at all. So the Constitution as written was a systemic white supremacist, racist, and sexist document. And if you don't believe me, get with a group of people who are diverse. Gender, race, all kinds of ways, and read the Constitution out loud. You will be appalled, embarrassed, and ashamed at how quickly the document turns exclusive and divisive. Again, well, we fix this, right? So, in 2020, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the ERA. Do you know that? 2020. But because the opportunity to ratify the ERA had expired, it didn't become an amendment. In the fall of 2020, when President Trump was in office, there was a bill that was introduced to extend the ratification period so that it would become an amendment, the 28th Amendment to our Constitution. And they already done this even recently. In 1992, the 27th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibited immediate congressional pay raises, was successfully ratified after 203 years. So that was initially proposed as part of the original Bill of Rights in 1789. So we said we've done this before. But that Congress didn't do anything about it. So in 2022, in January 2022, now under President Biden, and a Democratic-controlled Senate and House, a bipartisan group of senators proposed another bill to again extend the deadline. And it passed the House, and they were waiting for the Senate to address it. As of December 6, 2022, the Senate had not acted on that bill. So even though we've ratified, 38 states have ratified the ERA, it is not an amendment. And it's not the Democrats or the Republicans solely to blame. Both of them were in charge when they had an opportunity to do this, and both of them decided they weren't going to bring it to a vote. The Constitution today is still a systemically racist, sexist, and white supremacist document. And our Supreme Court agrees. In 1823, we had a Supreme Court case. It was Johnson versus McIntosh. This is two men of European descent. They're litigating over a single piece of land. One of them bought the land from a native tribe. The other one got the same land from the government, and they wanted to know who owned it. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had to determine the legal precedent for land titles. This was the John Marshall Court, considered one of the greatest Supreme Court jurists in U.S. history. Who had the right to sell the land, the tribe or the government? So they had to, what was the precedent for land titles? They wrote that the principle was that discovery gave title to the government by whose subject or by whose authority it was made. So discovery is what they taught, which would imply that Native peoples had the rights to the lands, because they were here first. But they went on to argue, and they said that the tribe of Indians inhabiting this country were fierce savages, whose occupation was war, whose subsistence was drawn chiefly from the forest. To leave them in possession of their country was to leave the country a wilderness. So they went on to argue that because natives are savages and not from human, they are really occupants of the land, while Europeans have the fee title that are discovered to the land, so they are the ones sovereign of it. This was 1823. That, along with other cases, created the legal precedent for land titles. That precedent and the doctrine of discovery are referenced by name by the Supreme Court in 1954, 1985, and most recently in 2005. I have a TED talk on some of these cases. I want to highlight this in 2005 case. The TED talk is called We the People, the Three Most Misunderstood Words in U.S. History. In 2005, see, when this country was founded, the George Washington administration reduced the United Indian Nations land holdings in central New York from 6 million acres down to a few hundred thousand acres through a treaty. And then they wrote a law that said only the federal government can purchase these lands. These lands are for the United Indian Nation. The state of New York continued to legally purchase the lands until they were all purchased up and they moved the United out. In the 1990s, the United moved back to central state New York and they bought some of their traditional lands on the open market. They paid full price for it. And they wanted to reestablish their traditional sovereignty over these lands. The state of New York and the city of Sherrill were not very keen on that because they wanted the land, the property taxes for those lands. So the city of Sherrill sued the United Indian Nation in federal court. The court ruled in favor of the United, so they joined as a county and appealed to the Federal Court of Appeals, and that decision was upheld. So they appealed the second time to the Supreme Court. The case was heard in 2004. The opinion came out in 2005. In the first footnote of the case, the 2005 Supreme opinion referenced by name the doctrine of discovery as they were establishing precedent. They went on to write that given the long-standing, distinctly non-Indian character of the area and its inhabitants, the regulatory authority constantly exercised by the state of New York, and the United's long delay in seeking judicial relief, we hold that the tribe cannot unilaterally revive its ancient sovereignty. They went on to reference another case that said it is impossible to rescind the cession and restore the Indians to their former rights because the lands have been open to settlement, which was white settlement, and large portions of these lands are now in the possession of innumerable innocent purchasers. They went on to argue that moreover, the properties here involved have greatly increased in value since the United sold them 200 years ago. Notably, it was not until lately that the United sought to regain ancient sovereignty over lands converted from wilderness to become parts of city like Sheridan. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's almost verbatim what John Marshall wrote in 1823. It just doesn't use the word savages. But it's the exact same idea. Your land is a wilderness, we've converted it to a town, to a civilization, and we can't go back. So in 2005, the Supreme Court concludes that we now reject the unification theory of the United Indian Nation and the U.S., and we hold that standards of federal Indian law, again, footnote 1, Doctrine of Discovery, and federal equity practice preclude the tribe from rekindling members of sovereignty that long ago we hold. This is probably one of the most white supremacist Supreme Court opinions written in my lifetime, and it was written and delivered by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now that's shocking to people because her legacy says that she was a voice of dissent on a conservative Supreme Court, fighting for the rights of the marginalized, which she was and which she did. The problem is because the land titles are not based on a treaty, which have all been broken, but on the doctrine of discovery and the legal understanding that natives are savages, this makes white supremacy a bipartisan value, which we demonstrated in 2005. And then the Supreme Court agrees. This isn't new information. 1857, we had the Dred Scott case, which stated that the Constitution and our founding documents were not written for the benefit of formerly enslaved peoples. And we've already reached this conclusion before. In the Constitution, there's what's known as the Supremacy Clause. It's Article 6, Clause 2, that states that the Constitution and treaties are the supreme law of the land. If there's a discrepancy, if there's a dispute, we always go back to the treaties or to the Constitution. Now, there was a case recently that you may have heard about. It was about reservations in Oklahoma. It was called McGirt versus Oklahoma. To understand this case, you have to understand American Indian law. So when a Native American commits a crime against another Native American on a reservation, the jurisdiction for that crime falls to the federal courts. So McGirt, a Native American, committed a crime against another Native person in the city of Tulsa. And he was tried by the state of Oklahoma, and he was found guilty. And he appealed his conviction because he said, based on treaty, Tulsa was on a reservation, and therefore he could try me in the wrong court. He should have tried me in the federal court, not a state court. The state of Oklahoma responded and said, we never treated Tulsa on a reservation. The courts have since agreed with us it's not a reservation. We have every right and the jurisdiction to try this in state court. But when there's an appeal, it went to court, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was heard in 2020. The opinion came out in summer 2020. And it was a shock because the opinion ruled in favor of McGirt. Neil Gorsuch was a Trump appointee who was actually one of the minds on the court regarding Indian sovereignty because of all his work in the Rocky Mountain region. And he wrote in his opinion that the state does not have the right to break a treaty, and the courts do not have the right to break a treaty. Therefore, for judicial purposes, most of eastern Oklahoma, including Tulsa, is on a reservation. This meant that Oklahoma now had to retry hundreds of cases because their convictions were now thrown out. But I don't trust the Supreme Court. And so I was campaigning for president back in 2020. I took time off from the campaign trail and I read the entire opinion. And sure enough, Gorsuch put some Easter eggs in his opinion to white supremacy. I want to read some of his statements to you. He wrote, to the extent whether a tribe continues to hold a reservation, there is only one place we may look. The acts of Congress. Not the Constitution, not the treaties, the acts of Congress. This court long ago held that the legislature will Congress can muster the will, there's no formula, they just have to state their intent. So here he's completely ignoring the Constitution and says the supreme law of the land is not the Constitution or the treaties, it's Congress. And whatever Congress wants, it has the right to break a treaty, and there is no one, including the Supreme Court, who's going to hold them accountable. So now that we have God's permission to commit genocide, we have a white supremacist doctrine of our Declaration of Independence, a racist consensus in white supremacist constitution, and it's legal now to do these things. I want to talk about some history, okay? Specifically, I want to talk about the 19th century. The 19th century is the century we call the century of expansion. Now, this is the century after about 30 new states to the Union. I made a graph, and I can't really show you this graph, but I made a chart, 1775 to 2016. And for every year our founding nation was in a declared state of war, I shaded that square blue. You can see how it's entire chart, right? We're at war for almost our entire history. For every year that we're fighting against NATO nations, I made those charts red. You can see the first two-thirds of our history is almost entirely red, including 75 square years from 1811 to 1886, where we had some constant state of war against Native nations or Native peoples. So clearly, the 19th century wasn't a century of expansion, right? It was a century of ethnic cleansing and genocide. It was during this century, and we fought hundreds of wars with Native nations during the 19th century. During this century is when we had the Removal Act, which is the act of Congress that allowed the military in practice by force to remove Native nations from their land in the east to enter lands further in the west. This resulted in the Trail of Tears for the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Long Walk for the Navajo, and the Mescalero Apache. All were desert tribes experienced forced relocation because of that act, and tens of thousands of people died as a direct result of the Removal Act. During this period, we also had the bloodiest massacre in the history of our nation, the Bear River Massacre. We'll talk about that later. We also had started boarding schools, forcibly assimilating Native peoples to Western European culture. The purpose of these schools was to kill the Indian to save the man. Children were taken from their homes, put in military-style boarding schools, punished for speaking their language, punished for practicing their culture. The first-hand stories I've heard from survivors of the abuse they endured, physical, mental, emotional, and sexual, is gut-wrenching. And the last of these schools didn't close until the 1970s and 80s. In 1890, we had another massacre. We talked about this one in our history books called the Massacre of Unsettling. You might have heard this mentioned a few places. We don't talk about it very depth, though. You see, the U.S. Army was trying to negotiate the surrender of Dakota Chief, and they met Dakota at Unsettling. Neither side trusted each other, and both sides were very heavily armed. No one knows who fired the first shot. They don't know if it was an American soldier or a Native warrior. Someone fired a shot, and chaos just broke out. Now, the U.S. Army has several of these Hotchkiss cannons. They're big cannons. They shoot several rounds a minute. They're accurate to a few hundred yards. They have them deployed at Unsettling. There's a ravine at Unsettling, so it's kind of up on a hill, and then there's a ravine down below that, and most of the Dakota women and children and even some of the men ran into this ravine as the fighting broke out to seek shelter from these guns. Now, the U.S. Congress awarded 20 Congressional Medals of Honor to the soldiers who participated in the massacre of Unsettling. And 3 of those medals, the one for William Austin, the one for John Gresham, and the one for Albert McMillan, were awarded specifically for their role in flushing the Dakota people out of the ravine. Let me just read one of them. William Austin, while the Indians were concealed in the ravine, he assisted them on the skirmish line, directing their fire, and using every effort to was wounded during this action. If you go along, so by 1840, we have reached about to the Mississippi River in our western expansion. All of the lands to the east were states, most of the lands to the west were either uncharted lands or even territories. If you look up congressional medals of honor, you can look them up by war and by conflict. And if you look up congressional medals of honor for the Indian war campaigns, you will find that between 1839 and 1898, the U.S. Congress awards 425 medals of honor to the soldiers who participated in the Indian war campaigns. At the end of that period, we had completed our manifest destiny, and nearly the entire continent was under statehood. During that period, the majority of the population ballooned from 5.3 million to 76.2 million, and the Navy population collapsed from 600,000 to 237,000. If you're doing the math in your head, that's a 61.47% rate of genocide. If you're comparing your math, that's almost twice the rate of genocide that Nazi Germany had over Jews in World War II. So we just have to be clear, between 1839 and 1898, the U.S. Congress awards 425 medals of honor for the ethnic cleansing of Native peoples and the genocide of Native nations. And we know we're doing. This wasn't a surprise, right? In 1851, Peter Burnett was the first governor of California. California jumped straight to statehood after the Gold Rush of 1849, resulted in a huge ethnic cleansing of Native peoples. And in his first state address, Governor Peter Burnett said that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct, must be expected. While we cannot anticipate this result, but with painful regret, the inevitable destiny of the race is beyond the power or the wisdom of man to avert. He's not saying families broke down and we can't feed these people. Nor is he saying disease has struck and we can't stop its spread. He's literally saying we can't stop killing these people until we complete our manifest destiny. And this, of course, is all in line with the promised land, right? In Joshua 10, it says, so Joshua subdued the entire region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, and the northern slope, together with all their kings. He left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded him. I want to pause here for a moment, just to take a breath. I want to get some feedback from you. I don't want your full story. I want 2 or 3 words. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, there's no good answer, nor is there a bad answer. I merely want you to emote for me. Tell me how this history makes you feel. 2 or 3 words or less. Horrible. Shitty.
Greater shock than that.
Greater shock than I imagined.
Sickened and embarrassed.
Sickened and embarrassed. Outrageous and what?
And so it goes.
So it goes.
Truth telling.
Truth telling.
Disgusted.
Disgusting.
Sinful. Sinful.
Sinful. Thank you. It's important to acknowledge these emotions. There's a reason we don't talk about this history. There's a reason we don't cover this in our platforms. There's a reason we don't mention it in polite company. Right? We don't know what to do with it. It's absolutely overwhelming. Now, I have a warning, it's going to get a bit worse before it gets better. But there's a few more things things we have to talk about that we don't like to talk about. If you read this book, there'll be many times you're going to want to throw against the wall. There are two chapters that I almost guarantee you're going to want to throw against the wall. And those are chapters 9 and 10. And the reason 9 and 10 are going to infuriate you is because in 9 and 10 you deal with the concept that the victors write the history. Okay, so the victors write the history. We pretty much know this. This isn't a surprise to us. But as Americans, we think this is a good thing. Why do we think this? Because we have a challenge, which is we've never lost a war that matters. We've never lost a war that matters. Right? Every major conflict we've been involved in, we have won. We've never had a regime change. We've never had a surrender. We've never given up large tracts of land. We've never borne the scorn of the global community. We have won every major military conflict we've ever been involved in. Technically, the Korean War is still going on. We pulled out of Vietnam, we pulled out of Afghanistan, but we didn't lose any land there. A little bit of embarrassment, but... So we've lived our history for 250 years. Now imagine with me for a moment. Just imagine Nazi Germany going to World War II. Okay? Let's just pretend. How do you think Nazi historians would have recorded the legacy of Adolf Hitler had they won World War II? Well, he'd be the greatest leader ever, right? Brought them from global obscurity, global prominence. How would Nazi historians have recorded the Holocaust had they won World War II? Well, we have Holocaust deniers today. Imagine if they won the war, right? What Holocaust? There was no Holocaust. Now that's why it's going to upset me deeply about chapters 9 and 10. That's a concept, that's an idea, that's something we have to understand, but it's not going to make you throw the book against the wall. What's going to make you throw the book against the wall is we're going to take that principle and apply it to this man, if you can see it, and that's Abraham Lincoln. See, because Abraham Lincoln, or because the United States of America has never lost a war that matters, our history, as we've already learned, is largely mythology. And we don't tell the truth about almost anything. And as a result, we don't have a clue who Abraham Lincoln is. So let me introduce you to him the same way he introduced himself to the nation when he ran for Senate in 1858. In the Lincoln Valley debates, pretty much the whole nation knew where he stood on chattel slavery and that he wanted to end that as an institution, but they didn't know much else about him, so he had to introduce himself. And so in the debates, this is what he said: I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I am not, nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors or Negroes, nor qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. I will say in addition to this that there is a visible difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality, and insomuch as they cannot so live while they do remain together, there must be a position of superior and inferior, and I, which is any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. Abraham Lincoln was a blatant, self-proclaimed white supremacist. Now, he lost that campaign, and 2 years later he ran for president, and he got elected. And the morning of his inauguration, the U.S. Senate was in a tizzy, because there were several states threatening to secede from the Union because of Lincoln's stance on chattel slavery. And so that morning, early in the morning of his inauguration, the Senate passed the Corwin Amendment. The Corwin Amendment constitutionally protected slavery in states where it already existed. It said no amendment shall be made to the Constitution which will authorize or give to Congress the power to abolish or interfere with any state with the domestic institutions thereof, including Republican states that by the ascension of the Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all of the public speeches of him who now addresses you, but I do quote from one of the speeches when I declare that I have no purpose, and he begins quoting himself from the Lincoln Douglas debates. Later he addresses the Cole Amendment, and he says, I understand the proposed amendment to the Constitution to the effect that the federal government shall interfere with the domestic institutions of the state, including that of persons under service. He said, to avoid misconstruction of what I have said, holding such a provision to now by implied constitutional law, I have no objection to it being made express and irrevocable. In 1862, Horace Greeley, who was the editor of the New York Tribune, wrote a scathing op-ed about him, called on him to immediately emancipate the slaves. He had pledged to do this during his campaign. He actually had the Emancipation Proclamation written. It was in his desk. And Horace Greeley wrote an op-ed demanding an immediate emancipation. Now, Lincoln was nervous. Why? Because there were 4 states in the North that had not seceded from the Union that had still allowed enslavement of African people. Those were the states of Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. And Lincoln was afraid of the political fallout what might happen in those states if he released the Emancipation Proclamation. So he responded to Horace Greeley with a letter, and he wrote this letter that our paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union. It is not to either save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. So Lincoln's response to this demand to emancipate enslaved peoples was to assure the slave owners in those states that he didn't think black lives mattered. He was doing this to preserve the Union. Didn't care what happened or didn't happen to black people. Now, when he released the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863, if you read the Emancipation Proclamation, it's very clear where he frees enslaved peoples. They're freed in Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. Do you know what's missing from that list? Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. In fact, the Emancipation Proclamation states that accepted parts are for the president left precisely as if this proclamation were not achieved. And people in those states didn't get their freedom until after Lincoln was assassinated in 1865. Now again, the capstone of Abraham Lincoln's legacy is the 13th Amendment, where he abolished slavery. But to understand the 13th Amendment, you have to understand the Lincoln Douglas debates. The Lincoln Douglas debates was not about the value of black people. It was about the institution of chattel slavery. But both Judge Douglas and Abraham Lincoln actually agreed in the why of white supremacy. Douglas thought we needed enslavement to keep white supremacy intact. Lincoln was fairly confident we could keep white supremacy in place even without chattel slavery. During the Lincoln Douglas debates, he was actually asked about the Declaration of Independence and if he thought it would apply to black people. And he said, I think the authors of that revolution intended to include all men, but they did not mean to declare all men equal in all respects. They did not mean to say that all men were equal in color, size, intellect, moral development, or social capacity. He's not saying some men are color and some men are more well-read. He's saying some men are superior and some are inferior, and his argument is very clear which race he believes is the superior race. He was asked about making citizens of black people, right? And he says Judge Dallas has said to him, he has not been able to give me an answer to the question of whether I'm in favor of legal citizenship. As far as I know, the judge has never asked me the question before. He shall have no occasion to ever ask it again, for I tell him very frankly, I am not in favor of legal citizenship. It's my opinion that the different states have the power to make a Negro a citizen under the Constitution if they choose. If the state of Illinois has that power, I should be opposed to the exercise of it. Now you may wonder why we're talking about citizenship and the Declaration of Independence in the Lincoln Douglas debates in 1858. Right? This is a midterm election. Well, why is this the topic of debate? Well, what happened in 1857? Dred Scott. Just like Roe v. Wade dominating the midterm elections of 2022, the application of law-founding documents to people of color dominated the political debate of 1858. And just to be clear, Abraham Lincoln was pretty adamant that he agreed with the Dred Scott decision. So as president, he now had a dilemma, which is he wanted to end chattel slavery. He did not believe black people were equal. He had no intention of making voters or jurors of Negroes or allowing them to office or to marry. He didn't think our founding documents applied to him. So what did he do with all of these enslaved peoples once he freed them? A lot of ideas were floating around. His magic bullet was the clause in the 13th Amendment. Let's not abolish slavery. Let's keep it legal within our criminal justice system. Giving a white juror, a white judge, or a white law enforcement officer Abraham Lincoln promised black people would never fail the right to come in, remove their civil rights without discussion. That was the solution. Abraham Lincoln was a blatant, unholy, self-proclaimed white supremacist, but we knew this. Right? This isn't a shock. We knew this. You all knew what the Douglas debates were bad. You didn't read them because you were afraid of it, but you knew it said things you didn't want to know about it. In fact, who's been to Lincoln Memorial? Who's been to Lincoln Memorial? So at the Memorial, the basement wall is a small museum about a third of the size of this room. On each wall are plaques, marble plaques, about 4 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide, with right after Abraham Lincoln etched on them. On one wall were 5 plaques with his thoughts on the Union. In the middle of that wall, on the plaque, etched in marble, is his quote that says, "I will save the Union. My men are honored in the struggle is to save the Union. It is not to save or destroy slavery. If I can save the Union without freeing the slave, I will do it. If I can save by freeing all the slaves, I will do it. And if I can save by freeing some and making others alone, I will also do that." There is a plaque hanging at the Lincoln Memorial announcing to every U.S. citizen in the world that Abraham Lincoln absolutely did not believe that Black Lives Matter. We're not lamenting it, we're not promoting it, we are celebrating it. This is how much this man of the Union, he didn't give a crap about black people. Like I said, we knew this. That's not what we need to look across the room. Well, we need to look across the room is chapter 10. Because chapter 10 talks about Lincoln's legacy of Native peoples. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act allocated 160 acres to any U.S. citizen willing to go west and homestead for 5 years. He also signed the Pacific Railroad. This act allocated land and the resources to complete the Transcontinental Railroad. That was the spring and the summer of 1862. In the fall of 1862, the Dakota people were very nervous because they had signed a treaty with the U.S. government that in exchange for their lands, they would get provisions to make it through the rough Minnesota winters. They had signed a treaty about 2 years ago, and the last winter the U.S. government did not meet its treaty obligations. And they were coming up on another winter, and they were not sure they were going to make it through it. And so one day, some of their young warriors were out, and they came across a white solid, and they decided to raid it and steal some eggs. They went in, they spilled the eggs, they got confronted, a fight broke out, and they killed some of the settlers. They went back to their camp. They told their elders what they had done, and there was a fierce debate on what we do. Do we go and turn these men in? Do we surrender? Well, what do we do? And they decided to go to war because they had no confidence the U.S. would meet its treaty obligations. And so a very bloody war broke out about 30 days ago. Both sides had a lot of casualties. Many people died. Ended after a 30-day period, half of the warriors fled north into Canada. The other half surrendered. Those who surrendered were immediately put into military tribunals. They were now being judged by the very people they were just fighting. Their trials were in a language they didn't understand. Witnesses were shared across trials, and they lasted just a few minutes. Over 400 of them were found guilty and convicted to death. That order was so genocidal, no one had a stomach to enact it, so about passed up the chain of command until it came to Abraham Lincoln. Even he couldn't bring himself to do it, and so instead of holding retrials, because these other trials were shams, he simply changed the criteria of what went to the death sentence. Under his new criteria, only 2 of the lawyers were going to die. And now he was afraid his white settlers in Minnesota were going to start rising up, which they already were doing. So again, for a second time, he didn't order retrials. He changed the criteria again and landed on a magic number of 38. That was Palatine. And so the day after Christmas, 1862, hundreds of people came out and they watched as the largest mass execution in the history of our nation took place was the hanging of the 38. In January 29, 1863, the Smithsonian Magazine writes this. In the frigid dawn on January 29, 1863, settlers, a leader known as Shoshone Obiora, or Big River, is in what is now Idaho, stepped outside his lodge and saw a curious band of fog moving down the bluff towards him across the half-frozen river. The mist was no fog, but it was steam rising in the sub-zero air from the hundreds of U.S. Army foot soldiers, cavalry and their horses. The Army was coming for his people. Over the next 4 hours, the 200 soldiers under Colonel Patrick Clemens' command killed 250 or more Shoshone, including at least 90 women, children, and infants. The Shoshone was shot, stabbed, and battered to death. Some were driven into the icy river to drown or to freeze. This was the deadliest Indian massacre in our nation's history. In February 1863, Abraham Lincoln nullified the treaties of all the tribes in Minnesota. In March of 1863, with no more treaties and without negotiation, he now ordered the removal of all the native peoples from Minnesota. They put them on wagons, they put them on barges, they marched them out of the state into the Dakota territories. It was a very violent, oppressive, unjust removal. They were put onto the land that was not sustainable for them. They were moved out of the state. In the fall of 1863, Abraham Lincoln's General Carleton gave this order in New Mexico, the territory of New Mexico. He said, henceforth, every Navajo male is to be killed or taken prisoner on sight. Say to them, go to the Oswego, I will pursue you and destroy you. We will not make peace with you on any other terms. This war shall be pursued until you cease to exist or move. There can be no other talk on the subject. In his book, the Book of the Navajo, by historian Raymond Friday Block, he reported that by the middle of December, most of the weak and aged had died. There was probably a family that cannot remember tales of an aged grandfather, a pregnant mother, or a little child that had to be left behind, and the camp had to be quickly deserted. The patrols were not interested in taking captives. It was too much trouble to transport them back to the forts. Any Navajo they saw was shot on sight. Mothers were sometimes forced to suffocate their hungry, crying babies to keep their families from being discovered and butchered by an army patrol. The U.S. Army went through out on the lands. They burned our crops, they destroyed our livestock, and they burned our homes, and they chased our people and rounded us up to take us down to Los Redondo. Nearly 10,000 Navajo men, women, and children were rounded up. Hundreds of my people died of exposure and starvation along the march. At Los Redondo, in his group, buried out over the knee-deep ground, it was a wretched land, they said. The soldiers prodded them with bayonets and herded them to adobe old compounds, where the soldier chiefs were always taunting them and putting numbers down in their books. To shelter themselves from the rain and the sun, they had to dig holes in the sandy ground and cover and line them with mats and woven grass. They lived like prairie dogs and birds. Crowded together as they were, disease had begun to take a toll on the weaker ones. It was a bad place. And although escape was difficult and dangerous under the watchful eye of the soldiers, many were risking their lives to get away. In 1864, the approval for Los Redondo was finally approved. They called it a reservation, but by all practical definitions, it was a death camp. And the approval that came through on January 15 of 1864 was signed by none other than Abraham Lincoln. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln signed the second half of the Pacific Railway Act, which allocated more land and resources to complete the railway. It also gave the railway companies the mineral rights to the ground so they would have financial incentive to work even faster. In November 1864, the Navajo, Cheyenne, and Arapaho were on their treaty lands in eastern Colorado. They were waving a white flag of surrender to show they were there peacefully, as well as an American flag. The men were out hunting, the women and children and elders were in the camp, and a Union Army, a U.S. Army led by a Methodist pastor, came over the hill, and he ordered all of them massacred. It was later reported that the soldiers paraded the genitalia of Native peoples down the streets of Denver to celebrate this massacre. Less than 10 days later, Abraham Lincoln gave his annual address in 1864. In this address, he stated that 1.5 million acres were entered under the Homestead Law, and the great enterprise of connecting the Atlantic with the Pacific States by railway and telegraph lines has been entered upon with a vigor that gives assurance of success. When you lay it out on that, the traffic really has three primary routes going all the way across the country. One route coming into Omaha, Nebraska, and they had to go through Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and come out near San Francisco. There was a northern route that started in Duluth, Minnesota, went through Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, and came out near Seattle, Washington. And there was a southern route that went through the territory of New Mexico, the territory of Arizona, and came out near Los Angeles, California. After the Bear River Massacre of the Shoshone in northern Utah and southern Idaho, after the removal of the Dakota people from Minnesota, after the massacre of Sand Creek in eastern Colorado, and the long walk of the Navajo and Musqueam Apache in the Four Corners area, Abraham Lincoln had basically ethnically cleansed all three routes of the Transcontinental Railway, making him one of the most genocidal presidents in our nation's history. Abraham Lincoln was also the president known for bringing Thanksgiving into the modern era. Prior to his administration, Thanksgiving was celebrated regionally on different days of the fall. And he had two Thanksgiving Day proclamations in 1863 and in 1864. I'm going to read his 1863 proclamation for you, where he said, "We for the virtues of wealth and of strength, from the fields of peaceful industry to the national defense, have not left the plow, shovel, or the ship. The axe has enlarged the borders of our settlement, and the mines, as well as iron and coal, as of the precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. Population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege, and the battlefield. And the country, rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God." So in the middle of this ethnic cleansing and genocide of native peoples, and the enlargement of the territories of the southern and lands to the west, Abraham Lincoln paused and called for a national day of thanksgiving and asked the country to give thanks to God for the fruits of the genocide he was actively committing. When you compare the numbers, and it's sickening, the only difference between Abraham Lincoln and Adolf Hitler is who won the wars. Adolf Hitler lost his war, and he's a global scourge. Abraham Lincoln won his wars, and he's essentially a god. Just like Hitler when they had World War II. But what's even more sickening is not the comparison between Lincoln and Hitler. It's that the difference between Nazi Germany and the United States of America is nominal at best. We've just won our wars. It's the only difference. We've won our wars. I want to talk for a moment here, because we're having a very national debate right now about white Christian nationalism. And we're not very well equipped to have this debate at all. Right? Not equipped at all to have this debate. We're a very young country, a preteen at best. Problem is that we're well-financed and heavily armed preteen, which is scary. Right? But that's what we are. We have a very simplistic political system. We have a two-party system, which makes every issue binary. And it degrades political debate down to obstructing your political opponents until you can get them out of office and enact your policies. That's the extension of the debate. And it's exacerbated by the fact that we have these news bubbles that we all exist in. And most people are aware of the Fox News bubble. And the Fox News bubble actually exists for a reason. The reason the Fox News bubble exists is because the majority of national media in the United States leans to the left. Not only is it CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, even AP, NPR, and PBS, all lean to the left. So when the right tries and says, no one's represented in the media, they're not entitled anymore. Because most of the media leans to the left. So Fox exists. Why does Fox outrank all the other networks in regards to news media? Because they're the only network. They're the entire so there's a huge viewership discrepancy between them and the other ones. There's no competition. There's now some far right competition. But so there is very much a CNN and MSNBC news coverage, which is just as toxic, uses the exact same tools. It exists to make you afraid, to make you angry, and to keep the Democratic Party in power. And Joe Biden and most other national political leaders live and breathe within the Fox of CNN, and MSNBC news bubble. They're both toxic. And so these two media outlets, these bubbles, do not equip us to have a dialogue about something as foundational as white Christian nationalism. So as a result, we're going to turn the debate almost all of the blame for white Christian nationalism being thrown at the feet of white Christian evangelical Republicans. And I'm not saying they don't need to own their part of this problem, because that demographic has done a lot to exacerbate the problem in the last 20 years, right? They have. But we're being told that that is the problem, and if we can just get that demographic out of power, marginalize the voices enough, we will solve the problem. And that is not true whatsoever. So close your eyes. I want you to imagine something in your mind right now. It's not going to be a hard thing to imagine. So I want you to think of a church sign, okay? A black church sign and a very white prophet standing in front of it, holding his Bible upside down. Everyone have that image in your mind? Right? It's a classic. You know this thing. It's like you can draw this if you have to, right? January 1st, 2020, a little while after the lynching of George Floyd in Minneapolis, there were protests against police violence, which people of color in Lafayette Park right in front of the White House. The morning of June 1st, law enforcement goes in and aggressively clears that park. Donald Trump walks out, walks in front of the church, holds up his Bible upside down at first, he turns it around, takes a picture, says almost nothing, and then walks back. He was immediately called out for what exactly he was doing, which was giving a dog whistle to white Christian nationalists. That's what happened. That's what he was called out for. We're all very aware of that. Now, in the 2020 election, Joe Biden promised that if he got elected, he would bring civility back to the White House. He was tired of Donald Trump's simple sentence structure. He was tired of Donald Trump using Twitter to berate not only our enemies, but even our allies. He was tired of talking about his great red button. And he said that if we elected Joe Biden, we would bring civility back into the White House. So we elected him, and his first big test came up in August of 2021 when we had a terrorist attack in Afghanistan. In this attack, several U.S. service members were killed, and Joe Biden knew he had to make a statement. So on August 26th, this is what he said. To those who have carried out this attack, as well as anyone who wishes America harm, know this. We will not forgive, we will not forget, we will hunt you down and make you pay. I will defend our interests and our people with every measure at my command. Now, 2 months ago, we were all alarmed because Vladimir Putin said that he would defend his country's territory with every measure at his command. And we cried out, said, you are the leader of nuclear power. How dare you threaten the world with your nuclear weapons? That is irresponsible for you to talk that way. And yet, this is exactly how Joe Biden talked a year ago. And I didn't tell you Joe Biden said this. You all would have thought Donald Trump said this because this is how the Republicans talk as well. Right? This is what we said. Why are our leaders act this way? Why are they not this way? Because this is what the American people want. Right? We would rather destroy the world than lose the war. And we want to have someone in the White House who is willing to push that button. So why do people like to be both the left and the right are willing to do this? He went on in this speech and he said all the things the Secretary of Defense and military leadership use the word sacred twice. Once in reference to the Capitol building, it's a sacred space, and once in reference to our duty, our sacred obligation to take better care of our military veterans. I do not disagree. We have an absolute moral obligation to take better care of the people who fight wars on our behalf. But he used the word sacred, bringing in the aspect of the divine. Why did he do that? Because Joe Biden believes the U.S. military is an army of the Lord, answering a prophetic call on a hard found by Isaiah the prophet. If you think white Christian nationalism is merely a problem for the right, I beg you to get out of the news bubble. I beg you to understand how these values are deeply embedded into the foundation of our nation. We've been living them out for the past 500 years. CNN's not going to tell you this, right? This would destroy the profit margin and cause their advertisers to flee. And Fox News doesn't have the theological acumen to point out these types of things. So we have to be aware of what we're being fed, what we're being told. We have to understand what we've done as a nation, what's written into our documents. We have to understand who we are so that we can do something different. I am absolutely adamant that the United States of America needs a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. It's a conversation I want on par with the truth and the reconciliation missions that took place in South Africa and the one that ended in Canada. But I will not call us truth and reconciliation. Why? Because reconciliation applies to the previous harmony. That didn't exist, right? That's not true. This thing began with a vision. It began with the doctrine of dehumanizing the other. Racial reconciliation is a misnomer. Truth and reconciliation is not accurate. We need a national truth and conciliation commission. Conciliation is about mediating a dispute. Reconciliation lets us live in this myth. We used to be great, let's become great again. Conciliation requires us to acknowledge this thing began in brokenness, and we have to fix it for the very first time. There was a quote by George Erasmus, who was a native leader from what's now called Canada. And when he was writing about the Truth and Reconciliation Mission that took place there about 10 years ago, he used this quote. The quote says, where common memory is lacking, where people do not share the same past, there can be no little community. If you want to build community, he said, you have to start by creating common memory. I love this quote. I think it gets to the heart of the nation's problem, especially with race, which is we don't have a common memory. We have a white majority that remembers a mythological history of discovery and expansion, opportunity and exceptionalism, and have communities of color and other marginal groups that have the lived experience of stolen lands and broken trees, of enslavement and Jim Crow laws, of Indian boarding schools and massacres, of internment camps and segregation and mass incarceration, families being ripped apart from borders, and there's no common memory. And we have to acknowledge that we have never, as a nation, had healthy community across racial lines. It's never happened. I'm not trying to shame people. I'm not trying to raise people. I'm not trying to cancel people. I'm trying to, as honestly and as straightforwardly as I can, teach these very unsettling truths for the purpose of creating a common memory so that we might be able to build for the very first time a much better and a much healthier community. Thank you for letting me share with you today. We have a few minutes now to let you do some Q&A. I know I've given you a ton of information.
And I think some of us would consider ourselves to be somewhat awake to what's going on in the world, that was a very opening thing to see. We knew about Reconstruction, but we didn't know that much about Reconstruction and the terrorism that went on. And I think, if you looked up your book this week, I think it adds to that knowledge that we think about the native side of this whole thing and how much this was like genocide. A number of years ago, I was a priest up in Portage, and they had a historical day. And so I had gone down to the library and kind of looked at some of the Portage history, 1830s, 40s, 50s. And there was a piece there that said that in one winter, the government was to send food supplies to the native community. And the community was waiting there on the Wisconsin River for that supply to come. And it never came that winter. And what the white citizens of Portage did, outside of their homes on the streets, were starving the native population. People were instructed to put linens over their windows so they did not have to see that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. Yeah, much of our ignorance about this history is an intentional ignorance. We don't want to know these things, and so we tend to turn away from it. But thank you for your comment.
Your talk reminded me of the themes that I mentioned in the 1619 project. And the thing that I think is so sad is that the native population is so small, and the black population is large, and the injustices are massive. And you talk about conciliation, and of course the conciliation, like the Canadians had with the natives in Canada, is in America it's a small scale of the conciliation that's needed with the African Americans, because, as you know, as you very well know, the winners do not tell the history of the American Confederacy. The Confederates are allowed to tell their own history, and that's why we still have glorification of the Confederacy by large segments of the population. Germany came to terms with the Nazis. America never came to terms with the Confederates. And it's such a massive cultural issue that the conciliation is needed. But the willingness of the American populace to accept the premise of the 1619 project is just not there. And so we have a long way to go. But your kind of presentation helps move everybody. And, one of the things you didn't mention, which I think I learned in the 1619 project, maybe it was slow reading, was how Lincoln's solution to the freedom of all these black people was to move them out of the country, give them their own country, off of our continent. His policy position was, we have to remove them from North America and send them somewhere else.
And if you think it's harder to get our country to deal with the Confederacy, it's even harder to deal with Lincoln. Right? Because Lincoln's the hero from both parties. And, when I was writing this book, I searched Lincoln and genocide, and there's almost nothing written, right? There's almost nothing written about the genocide of Voluntary Lincoln. It's because we are not even close to breaching that conversation. We're struggling with dealing with the Confederacy, and we don't even know yet what to do with our hero on both sides. So thank you for that comment. Any other questions? I know it's getting kind of late, so we've been here for a while. I think there's a bathroom over here if you need to use the bathroom, but I want to thank
your presentation, for your witness, and for the hard words that you did today. Thank you so much.